I'm Stu Bailey, and I formed the Kentucky Lacrosse Association back in the summer of 1997, and was the first women's high school coach. And I've coached all the way up to 2012. Then I made a career move and kind of have been out of it for the last 5 years, so unfortunately. So we'll hopefully eventually get back into it when I'm done with this career move. So it's just one of those things.
Hi, my name is Chase Carraro. I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Went to the University of Denver and St. Xavier High School.
My name is Tim Donley from Bowling Green, Kentucky, and currently I am involved with Bowling Green High School lacrosse.
My name is Shawn, Hamill. Relocated to Louisville, Kentucky in 2003. After relocating here, I got involved with the Kentucky Lacrosse Association in a coaching capacity. At that time, I worked with individuals like Scott Howe and Stu Bailey and Pete Schroeder. That led into getting involved in the lacrosse boys officiating, and started up as the head boys youth and high school assigner for lacrosse, and opened up Stickhead Lacrosse and Sports in 2003 with Scott Howe, and been doing that as corporate manager of the business since 2003. I'm now a collegiate lacrosse official and also do some coaching with my son's team.
My name is Greg Schuler. I'm an official with the Bluegrass Lacrosse Officials Association. That's how I really got into it. I'm a former member of the KLA and former president as well. Presently, I'm commissioner of the Commonwealth Boys High School League and the commissioner of the Commonwealth Girls High School League. I'm also the sub-district coordinator of officials in Kentucky for U.S. Lacrosse, so I help to disseminate information from U.S. Lacrosse to officials, and I am responsible for the training of officials in the state as well. And then lastly, I have a little fun. I assign officials for the National College Club League, of which EKU, Western, Louisville, Bellarmine Club, all have teams, and Northern Kentucky as well. So I assign for those as well. So kind of wear a lot of different hats in the lacrosse community in Kentucky right now.
So how did you get involved in the sport of lacrosse?
Well, I'm from Baltimore, born and raised, and really only didn't play in high school. I played baseball. But every summer, when I come back from college in the summertime, I played in a summer league. My friends always played, so I decided to play. Played football, then started picking in the summer, played summer leagues, and that's how I grew from there. So I played in the men's league here in Louisville. Started about 1978, so from there on.
So I was really lucky in that regard. I had a brother 6 years older than me, Casey, who actually played for one of the first high school teams in Kentucky. He was on St. X's inaugural team back in right around 2002 or so. And at the time I was still playing travel baseball, and he would get me out in the front yard with my baseball glove and his lacrosse stick, and we would throw back and forth, and eventually he was able to get a lacrosse stick into my hands. So started learning, out in the front street, sort of just playing catch with him. And then around 8th grade, kind of burned out on the whole travel baseball thing and decided to transition into lacrosse, which is when I started playing, every spring from 8th grade on.
My story is a little bit unique. I got involved in lacrosse basically due to a box of Hostess donuts. My son, who was in high school at the time, had watched a lacrosse game one Saturday. He couldn't find anything else on TV, and went to school that following Monday, and apparently a couple of his classmates had similarly watched lacrosse, and being typical naive but enthusiastic kids, they decided, hey, we should start a team. And they went to the principal and said, hey, we want to start a lacrosse team, and of course the principal looked at them and said, no, there's no way, it's not going to happen. And they said, why not? And the principal said, well, first you'd have to get the athletic director on board, and good luck doing that. So these kids on their own put together a kind of a formal proposal, made an appointment with the athletic director, and had their meeting. And that night, my son came home, and I said, "Hey, how'd the meeting go?" And he says, "Well, it was going pretty well until the athletic director ran out of donuts." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And apparently the athletic director at the school, one of his favorite pastimes was to keep a couple boxes of Hostess donuts in his desk drawer, and he'd eat them throughout the day. And apparently the meeting was going well, and he was paying attention until he opened his desk drawer, and there were no more donuts, and he abruptly said, "The meeting's over, and we're not doing lacrosse." And that kind of ticked me off, that I thought, here's a bunch of kids that are interested in doing some activity, rather than going and hanging out at the mall, and yet every place they turned, all they got was discouragement. And I thought, there's got to be a way to get this done. So I went up to the school and said, "Hey, what's the deal? How can we do this?" They gave me 20 reasons why you couldn't do it. We found solutions to those 20 reasons. They gave us 20 more. I kind of got involved with the whole thing because I thought these kids weren't getting a fair shake, but I've stayed involved in it because of the game. As part of that, I got word that there's this organization, Kentucky Lacrosse Association, and if you want to form a team, talk to them. And the first person I talked to was a guy by the name of Shawn Hamill. I didn't know who he was at the time. And while the school was giving me 20 reasons why this wasn't going to happen, Shawn from the start was giving me 50 reasons how it could happen. And I laugh thinking back to those early days. Shawn would call me and say, "What are you going to do for goals?" And I was like, because I was totally new to lacrosse, I was like, "Oh, you need goals for the game?" And 2 days later, 2 goals would arrive from Shawn. He just made it so easy because of his belief in the game. And then he turned us on to this hippie kid that was moving to Bowling Green from Oregon, a guy by the name of David Bruns, who, right person, right time, came in, taught us not only the fundamentals of the game, but taught us to really respect the game. I started in lacrosse because of a box of donuts, but I've definitely stayed with lacrosse because of, respect for the game.
In 1987, I transferred high schools, and the school that I was attending was a small private school that offered a few sports, I believe soccer, tennis, and lacrosse. And being a avid high school athlete, I was intrigued by lacrosse, was approached by my lacrosse coach, and several friends played lacrosse. And so I decided to give it a shot, and it just was a natural fit for me. It allowed me to participate in a team sport. It offered all the things that I enjoyed in athletics. It gave me great opportunity to interact with my friends from school, and basically allowed me to play a little bit in college at the next level. So that's basically my introduction to lacrosse, was back in 1987 when I transferred high schools.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I guess for about, the first 20-some years of my life, I never even saw a lacrosse game. Didn't even know what it was. And I went to a graduate school up at Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, Maryland. They have a graduate theology school there on the campus, which is a liberal arts Catholic college. And I wasn't there but about a week and a half. And I looked out my window to this big field out in front of the seminary, and here are these guys with these sticks coming out for practice and throwing balls and helmets and shoulder pads and all these pads everywhere, and kind of doing all this crazy stuff. And I started looking at it, and I just got interested in it and started paying attention to it. Went out and watched the practices, and I like the speed of the game. I like the up and down part of it. I like the physicality part of it, and yet there wasn't a lot of tackling or anything. The ball was moving fast and continuously, and I like that. So for the 4 years I was up there, I probably went to just about every game if I could, and learned a little bit of the rules. We had a little intramural program up there that I got into. We were using tennis balls and sticks, and so there was really not much other equipment. You know, these days you probably wouldn't be able to do that anymore for insurance purposes. But so I learned a few of the rules, although we didn't play many of the big rules, and so that's how I got interested in it. And then, quite honestly, didn't see it again for a number of years. In 2005, down here in Lexington, I'm running with a group, and afterwards we go to Panera. A bunch of runners were always gathering there every Saturday, and this guy, Tim Yessen, who was also a runner, come to find out he had played at UK, and he was the assigner for officials here in Lexington and the area. Knew I did basketball and said, hey, you interested in doing lacrosse? We need some lacrosse officials. So I said, sure, why not? I mean, at least I had seen the game before, so I went to the training, and here I am. So really, I guess that was 10, 11 years ago. Yeah.
What is your fondest memory of the sport of lacrosse?
I don't know if I can answer that in just one memory. Obviously, the sport has meant so much to me over the past 30 plus years of being involved in the sport in different capacities. One of my earliest memories back in Maryland, where I grew up, was attending the 1989, I believe it was, NCAA Final Four weekend at the old Byrd Stadium, which was the University of Maryland's old stadium. I think it was Maryland, Johns Hopkins, North Carolina, and Syracuse playing. And if I remember correctly, Syracuse, I think, beat Johns Hopkins 13-12 in the finals. And so many great players back then that were my idols on the field are now coaches and significant contributors to the game. Dave Petramala and the Gate brothers, and the list goes on and on. Quint Kesnick, who now reports for ESPN, was a goalie at Johns Hopkins at that time. So that was one of my earliest memories of being able to enjoy that experience with friends and teammates from my high school. And then moving forward, opening Stickhead Lacrosse in 2003 has provided me the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people in Kentucky and around the region, in Tennessee and Indiana and Ohio, and even further than that. Just opening doors and allowing me to give back to the sport where so many people, like former coaches and former individuals that allowed me to enjoy the sport of lacrosse as a high school and college student. I'm now able to do that in various roles, and Stickhead was a conduit for that. So I would say, you know, my past 15 years with Stickhead Lacrosse was another fond memory. And then finally, I would say probably my fondest memory is more recent, the ability to share the game of lacrosse with my family, and especially my son Connor. You know, we're able to have that father-son bond now as a player-coach, which is a unique dynamic that we'll be able to share together throughout his playing career. And I'm sure that's something that we'll be able to reminisce about as he gets older, and think back to the times that we were able to celebrate the wins and the losses. So that's probably my fondest memory.
You know, I think overall the fondest memory is just, especially with the KLA, is just the kids. Especially at the high school level, middle school to high school. Now that I've been out of it, and I coached my daughter, which is probably the most memorable part of it, being with her and her friends. But watching these girls graduate, you know, either high school, college, and move on, and now I see them now with their own families and how well they're doing, and that's just a great feeling. It's all about the kids, in my opinion. So that's been the most fun.
So I've been lucky enough to play in a lot of big games, whether that was for Denver or for St. X. So, you know, Denver, the Final Fours obviously were big, a big deal. It's kind of the pinnacle of the sport in terms of you're playing in front of 30,000 plus people, and you're playing in an NFL stadium, and it's just a very cool environment in terms of what a lacrosse environment kind of amounts to. And then also played in some great games for St. X versus Trinity specifically. A couple sellout games in high school, which was great for Kentucky high school lacrosse. And then other than that, other than those big games and kind of big game moments, I would have to say probably getting recruited to the University of Denver. Really just because it was probably the biggest milestone for me as a kid being from Kentucky. I didn't have a ton of coaches looking at me, in freshman, sophomore year of high school. So, I had a lot of people rooting for me. I had people telling me that probably wasn't possible for a kid from Kentucky to go play at a Division I school. Probably wasn't possible for a kid at 5'6" to go play at a Division I school. So ultimately, that milestone of getting recruited to Denver and coming out here and having a good career was, one of the most important things to me, because it kind of proved to me, what I'm able to do when I kind of set my mind to a goal and just go after it relentlessly.
Fondest memory of lacrosse. Well, those memories are continuing to be written. Probably the most satisfying thing is I have, just seeing kids take the opportunity to lacrosse and go on to better things. I had a kid that was relatively shy, didn't have much self-confidence, was relatively scattered in his thoughts, recently graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy. I've had kids that clearly have gone to college and wouldn't have been able to do so without lacrosse. I have a kid that's in medical school. I have a kid that's getting a PhD. I have a kid who played for us that then not only decided to selflessly come back and coach the team, but it's turned into like a magnificent father, magnificent family man. Those memories continue to emerge, but probably the best memory, and I remember it vividly, is our first ever game. And we were playing Father Ryan JV team, which is about an hour south of Bowling Green. And, we got on the bus, and it was a pretty quiet bus ride down there. And the bus pulled in, and we got off the bus, and man, walking across that parking lot, we were pioneer warriors going into uncharted territory. We were facing a battle we had never fought before, and it was epic. My oldest son took the first face-off, got knocked on his backside, but took the first face-off and actually scored the second ever goal in the history of lacrosse in Southern Kentucky. And my younger son scored the first ever goal. So, it's just a great day. And to see it all come to fruition, and we found our legs, and you could already see the fire starting to burn for lacrosse. That's probably my best memory.
I think my fondest memory as an official, though there are just a lot, are the game that I was assigned to do at the Ohio State back in 2016, and Towson came into town to play, and so I got that assignment, which was quite a big thing for me, and I think quite a big thing for any official in Kentucky, really, to get a high-end D1 assignment. So I was assigned there, and I went to the game, got dressed, and just walking out on the field at the Shoe up at the Ohio State University football complex, and just looking around, memories of all the football games I'd watched on TV. I'd never been there before, and then working the game with against two teams that actually went to the NCAA tournament that year, both high-end D1 teams, great lacrosse up and down, actually went in overtime, and finally Towson won. But just pausing through that game and just being aware of where I was and trying not to let the game get too big for me. I have to admit I was a bit nervous till we got going. But I think that's been my fondest memory as an official. And I think because it brings together all the hard work, the commitment, the focus, the people that helped me get there, the travel that I've done. So I think that was my fondest memory as an official. Yeah, so my second memory has to do not only with me as an official, but I think also my involvement in the wider lacrosse community, because remember, it was back during that time that Kissel formed in Louisville, and so the rest of the schools, so the rest of the teams in the state got together and formed the Commonwealth League, and they asked me to be the commissioner. So that first year, it was difficult. It was a lot of hard work to pull it together, to get the league going, bylaws set. And but we did it, and we got through the season, and we had a great tournament. And then we came to the championship game at Bryan Station on a beautiful Saturday night in May, and it was Lexington Catholic, where I think were freshmen during that time, against Henry Clay, and wow, those games, all those games, whether they be regular season or whether they be championship games, have always been intense. Great competition. Scores have always been close, almost always one-goal games, if not overtime games. And it was, I think it was in the fourth quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, shortly into the fourth quarter, there was a timeout. And I was on the field reffing with a couple of my buds, and I just looked over at the teams intensely. Everybody was paying attention to the coach because it was coming to crunch time. I looked up in the stands, and crowds were going crazy and cheers from both sides. And I just looked around, and I thought to myself, wow, this is good stuff. This here is just, you don't get any better than this. Beautiful night, family, friends are here, kids with the little sticks from middle school were there, and watching this game, and you guys were intense, and it was close, and just good lacrosse. And I just felt really grateful to be a part of not only an official crew on the team, but just being a part of the league and being a part of the growth of lacrosse in Kentucky. So I think that's probably my fondest memory of being a part of the lacrosse community in Kentucky.
Where do you see the sport going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Wow, that's a loaded. I mean, hopefully, if you mean locally or around the world, hopefully eventually it'll become an Olympic sport, which I'm really hoping for. I know the U.S. Lacrosse is really pushing for that, expanding into the European Union and all that stuff, and African nations too. And that would be great. That would be exciting. It was back early 1900s, I think, was the last time it was in the Olympics. It would be great to get that back. Just more world recognition, playing it. It's a great game. In my opinion, it's a much better game to play than watch. I like watching it, but I'd much rather play it. And just to watch it grow here it's in the high schools, getting into the middle schools, but I'd like to be sanctioned in Kentucky as a sport. That would be awesome to have that happen. And because it's in Ohio, Tennessee, Indiana, you know. For a while we were a big hole. We just weren't doing that since 1998 is when we started. So that's how I would like to see that develop into that. That would be a great evolution of the game here.
So I see the sport continuing to grow for sure. Part of what I think is going to happen over the next 5 years is lacrosse is going to transition, from this sort of more friends and family sport at the moment where maybe you're not a fan unless you have a kid who plays or a cousin who plays, to more of a spectator sport where you have a lot of people in the fan bases of certain college teams and certain pro teams who maybe didn't play the sport growing up or didn't know anybody who played the sport growing up. And I think that's going to kind of happen at the college level first. And I think, that's well represented by, ESPNU's college lacrosse schedule this year. Saturdays are going to be college lacrosse game day in a lot of ways on ESPNU. And I think it's a great start towards, also leveling up the pro game as well as high school.
Well, clearly lacrosse, has caught fire, and it's raging across the state of Kentucky. Just since I became involved, it's amazing how much it's grown, and obviously it's only going to continue to do that. But and not to get too political, but I think lacrosse is at a really critical stage. The demise of football is due to the concerns over long-term damage with football, and I think lacrosse has an opportunity to grow, but only if we can preserve the physicality of the game, but virtually eliminate the risk of head injury. We all know what the knock on lacrosse is. It's parents that are new to the game, which is how the game grows, come in and say, hey, it's football with less padding. I think we have to change that narrative. I think it has to be football, but it's safer. And I know the obstacles to doing that. The high school, unskilled high school, new to the game approach is a lot different than it is. The college game is completely different, but we have to find ways now. We have to find ways now to make the high school game as it is in the college game. I think that's really important.
I think on a local level, I think we're going to see the sport continue to grow in the state, and around to other areas of the state as more generations get out of college and come back and get back to the sport. We're starting to see that now. Some of the early high school students and youth are growing up and coming out of college and getting back into the sport, whether it's coaching or officiating or just being a volunteer on the KLA board or in other capacities and helping grow the game. So I would say in the near future, 5 to 10 years, maybe sooner, Kentucky High School Athletic Association may sanction lacrosse. I think that's on the horizon in the near future. Regionally and nationally, I think the sport will continue to grow, hopefully at the youth level, at the inner city level. Some of the areas that maybe isn't as populated and the game isn't played as heavily as maybe some of the high school or affluent areas as it is now, but I could see it growing in those areas. I think with the help of U.S. Lacrosse and what they've done and the foundation that they've built to allow those things to happen through their projects and through their community efforts, in their diversity grants, and in their annual lacrosse convention that is a positive force for the game to allow people to experience those resources, to take advantage of those resources. I think all those things will help the game grow both at a local level, a regional level, and as well as a national and international level through the efforts of people like, or the groups like U.S. Lacrosse and the Kentucky Lacrosse Association.
Number one, I think we need to continue to work to get the sport sanctioned by the KHSAA. I think that's an important part of our growth. I think that puts us smack dab in the middle of the athletic programs in the school, gives us validity, gives our kids access to fields and to practice and transportation and weight rooms on an equal basis so that they can develop their skills even more. And I say that on the boys' side, and I say that on the girls' side as well, where we've got to even do more work to develop the girls' side of all this. So I think that's maybe not number one in importance, but just the first one I think of. Number two, especially in Kentucky, I think we need to develop our youth. I think we need to get sticks into kids' hands, again, both girls and boys, a lot younger, so that they have those years to develop their skills. So when they come to middle school, it isn't the first time they've picked up a stick, or for some even in high school, the first time they picked up their stick. Hard to develop skills, etc., and really you're lacrosse acumen when you're just learning the rudiments of the game. So I think we need to do that. I think U.S. Lacrosse has done a wonderful job in putting together the athletic development model, and I hope we could follow that. Small-sided fields, less kids on the field, more touches, not just to get kids involved in the game, but to keep them involved and keep it exciting for them so they can compete at their own level and their own development cognitively and athletically. So I think that's got to be a huge focus for all of us, especially local associations in the KLA as well. And I think thirdly, what I'd like to see develop, and it already is because I've started getting my foot into officiating box lacrosse, I would like to see the box game come more into our state. Again, if you know much about the box game, it mirrors this athletic development model. It's a smaller field inside, less number of players, more touches, develops skills with sticks, passing and shooting and footwork and picking and rolling and all the things that I think really would enhance the field game. So I really think the box game is going to really help players in their development in their field game as well. So those are the things that I really would like to see. Sanctioning by the KHSAA, both for the girls and boys. The continued emphasis on youth and getting more youth involved and getting them involved in a way that not only excites them presently, but retains them, keeps them moving in the sport. And I think box lacrosse is going to get bigger and bigger as well. I think that's going to, on its own right, I think it's going to help the field game too. So those would be the things I see over the next 5 years that I think are going to be happening in Kentucky. At least I hope they are.